The biting wind cut through the city streets as Harold wrapped his tattered scarf around his neck. At 78, his bones ached more than ever, but he refused to let age slow him down. Every evening, he took his usual walk to the diner on Fifth Avenue, where the owner, Marty, always had a warm cup of coffee waiting for him. Tonight, as Harold shuffled down the sidewalk, he noticed a young man, probably in his late 20s, sitting hunched over on a bench. His clothes were worn, his face gaunt, and his eyes held the unmistakable weight of despair. Harold had seen enough hard times in his life to recognize them in others. Without a second thought, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a few crumpled bills, the little he had for his own meal, and walked up to the stranger. "You look like you could use a warm meal," Harold said, extending the money. The young man, startled, looked up. "I can't take this, sir. You need it more than I do." Harold shook his head. "Son, I've been blessed in more ways than money can count. Take it. Eat something." Reluctantly, the young man took the money, his eyes misting with gratitude. "Thank you. My name's Jordan." "Harold," he replied with a gentle smile. "Hang in there, kid." Neither of them could have imagined that this small act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change their lives forever. A week had passed since Harold had given the young man, Jordan, his last few dollars. He hadn't expected anything in return. He never did. Life had taught him that kindness was its own reward. That evening, as he settled into his usual spot at the diner, Marty placed a fresh cup of coffee in front of him. "You've got a visitor," Marty said, nodding toward the entrance. Harold turned and saw Jordan standing there, looking far better than before. His clothes were still worn, but his face seemed brighter, his posture stronger. Clutched in his hand was a small brown paper bag. "I've been looking for you," Jordan said, stepping forward. "I wanted to pay you back." Harold chuckled, waving his hand. "Don't worry about it, son. It was just a meal." Jordan shook his head. "No, it was more than that. You don't know what you did for me that night." He hesitated before continuing, his voice thick with emotion. "I was at my lowest point. I had nothing. I was ready to give up." Harold studied the young man, his heart clenching. He had seen darkness in his own life, but the thought of this boy being so close to the edge pained him deeply. Jordan placed the paper bag in front of Harold. "I don't have much, but I wanted to get you something, just as a thank you." Harold opened the bag and found a warm meal inside. A sandwich, a small cup of soup, and an apple. Harold smiled, touched by the gesture. "You didn't have to do this." Jordan nodded. "I did. Because of you, I have hope again." Little did they know, this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Harold and Jordan sat together in the diner, sharing a quiet meal. It had been years since Harold had felt this kind of warmth, true human connection. As they ate, Jordan shared more about his past. He had once been a promising student, but life had taken an unexpected turn when his mother passed away. His father, unable to cope, turned to drinking, and soon they lost everything. Jordan had been on the streets for months, surviving however he could. Harold listened intently, his heart heavy with sympathy. "You're a smart kid, Jordan. You just need a fresh start?" Jordan sighed. "That's the problem. I don't know where to start." Harold thought for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn business card. "I may not have much, but I know someone who might be able to help." Jordan took the card, reading the faded print. Richard Calloway, investment firm. Jordan's eyes widened. Wait, Callaway? As in the CEO of Callaway Investments? Harold chuckled. That's right. I used to work for him a long time ago. He's an old friend. Jordan stared at Harold in shock. He had assumed the old man was just another struggling retiree, but it was becoming clear there was more to him than met the eye. Think you'd be interested in an opportunity? Harold asked, a knowing smile on his face. Jordan nodded, hope flickering in his eyes. More than anything. Harold patted his shoulder. Then let's see what we can do. What neither of them knew was that fate had even bigger plans for them both. A few days later, Harold and Jordan arrived at the towering glass building of Callaway Investments. The sleek, modern structure stood in stark contrast to the rundown streets Jordan was used to. His palms were sweaty as he followed Harold through the grand entrance. The receptionist gave Harold a warm smile. Mr. Hayes, Mr. Callaway will be thrilled to see you. Jordan raised an eyebrow. Mr. Hayes? He had never heard Harold's last name before. Within minutes, they were led to a lavish office, where an older man with salt and pepper hair stood behind an enormous mahogany desk. As soon as he saw Harold, his face lit up. Harold, you old fox, I thought you disappeared. Richard Callaway strode forward, embracing Harold in a firm handshake. Harold chuckled. Not gone, just laying low. Richard gestured for them to sit. So what brings you here? Harold nodded toward Jordan. This young man needs a chance. He's bright, determined, and just needs someone to believe in him. Richard studied Jordan carefully. Tell me about yourself. Jordan hesitated before launching into his story, his struggles, his passion for numbers, and his dream of getting an education in finance. Richard listened intently, nodding occasionally. When Jordan finished, Richard leaned back in his chair. You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago. He turned to Harold. You remember when you took me under your wing, Harold? Back when I was just a lost intern? Jordan's jaw dropped. Harold had mentored Richard Callaway? Harold smiled modestly. Everyone deserves a break. Now it's your turn to pay it forward. Richard tapped his fingers against his desk, deep in thought. Then with a smirk, he said, Jordan, how would you like an internship here? We'll cover your education, too. Jordan nearly fell out of his chair. Are you serious? Richard nodded. Harold believes in you, and that's good enough for me. Tears welled up in Jordan's eyes. He had spent so long struggling, and now, because of a simple act of kindness, his life was changing forever. Harold patted Jordan's shoulder. I told you, son. Sometimes the right person at the right time can change everything. Little did they know, fate had one more surprise in store. Jordan could barely contain his emotions as he left the office with Harold. His heart pounded with excitement, but also disbelief. Was this real? Was he really about to have a shot at a future he had only dreamed about? As they stepped onto the bustling city street, Jordan turned to Harold. Why did you help me? You barely knew me. Harold smiled, his weathered face filled with warmth. Because once, a stranger helped me when I had nothing. I was young, reckless, and on the brink of losing everything. A kind man gave me a second chance, and I promised myself I'd do the same for someone else when the time came. Jordan nodded, his throat tight. I won't waste this chance. I swear, Harold chuckled. I know you won't. Months later, Jordan adjusted his tie, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The sleek business suit felt foreign but empowering. It was his first official day as a financial analyst at Callaway Investments, and he was ready to prove himself. He grabbed his bag and rushed out of his small but tidy apartment, making his way to Harold's favorite coffee shop. When he walked in, he expected to see Harold sitting in his usual spot by the window. But something felt off. The table was empty. A sinking feeling settled in Jordan's stomach. He asked the barista, "Hey, have you seen Harold today?" The young woman hesitated before her expression softened. I'm sorry. Harold passed away last night." Jordan froze. The world seemed to tilt beneath him. "How?" he whispered, barely able to form the word. She sighed. He had been sick for a while, but never told anyone. He always said he wanted to go on his own terms, still helping people. Jordan felt his chest tighten. The man who had changed his life was gone. But as he stood there, something dawned on him. Harold's legacy wasn't just in his own success. It was in the kindness he passed on. And now, it was Jordan's turn. 1 year later, Jordan sat in a conference room at Callaway Investments, reviewing the files of a struggling single mother who had applied for financial aid. He read her story and saw himself in her. Desperate, determined, just needing someone to believe in her. Without hesitation, he signed the approval form. As he leaned back in his chair, he whispered, "This one's for you, Harold." Kindness is a ripple effect. One good deed can change a life, and that life can go on to change countless others.